Something bad is about to happen. The sudden words caused me to gasp. Something bad is about to happen. What does this mean? I was on my way to a prenatal checkup, cradling my full-term belly while waiting for the light to change at a crosswalk. These words were spoken by an elderly woman next to me. I didn't know this woman. I was already anxious about giving birth. And now this person is saying such things. How insensitive can a person be? Before I could vent my rage, the woman continued. At this rate, you'll end up being a single parent. She spoke quietly and calmly, as if predicting the future, amidst the sound of passing cars. My husband's name popped into my mind. The light suddenly turned green, evoking dread. I could not sit still and called my husband. Please answer the telephone. I waited with a prayer-like attitude, and then the ringing stopped. Hello, what is wrong? His usual tone of voice gave me a moment of relief, and I said, Hey, sorry, but could you check around the house for me? Shane appeared perplexed, but when I pressed him, he realized something was amiss. I listened as he called out to his father and went outside, leaving. I was holding my breath when the phone connected. I concentrated on the sounds emanating from the phone. After a while, I heard 2 quick gasps from them. Who is there? Who is at our house? I heard running footsteps and Shane yelling. Wait! He appeared to be running desperately, as the only sound coming through the phone was the wind rushing past. My name is Ruby Marshall. I'm in my 30s, married, and living with my husband, Shane Ruby. I purchased some cake. Let us eat together. Shane visits the cake shop near the station about once a month. Like this. Wow, blueberry cake. How cute. This is a new flavor. I thought you would enjoy it. Thank you. Shane. No, I thank you for everything. We smiled sheepishly at each other while eating the blueberry cake. We aren't particularly wealthy, but these little treats make us very happy. We've known each other since high school. At the time, I had lost my parents in an accident and couldn't even attend school. Shane would bring me school handouts on days when I was crying all the time. It was because our homes were close. There was always a message written in the corner of the handouts he brought, such as, Let's play soccer or Sports Festival. Just one simple line. Those casual words eventually became something I looked forward to. Even now, when I mention it, Shane feels embarrassed. I was able to graduate from high school thanks to his support. After that, we began dating, went to university, got jobs, and eventually married. Shane's parents were aware of my family situation and treated me as their own child. Ruby, is anything bothering you? Please feel free to tell me anything, whether I was a student or after our marriage. My mother-in-law. Monique's words didn't change. Ted, my father-in-law, was equally caring. I quote V, always felt indebted to Shane and his parents, and I'm so grateful. It was in the summer, just over 2 years after we married. I had been feeling ill for days and had even started getting dizzy. Could this be heat stroke? The heat had been severe for days, and there were warnings about heat stroke. However, something seemed off. So I went to the hospital and learned that I was pregnant. A new life. A new family was developing within me. The more I reflected on it, the happier I felt. Almost want to avoid the kitchen that says there's a baby in my belly, which I used to see from a distance. Was now in my hands. And the time had come for me to attach it to my bag. Overjoyed, I went home, made dinner, and waited for Shane to return. I'm home. What's happening? Has something bad happened? Shane noticed something when he saw me sitting at the living room table. It was probably because I couldn't stop smiling. I spoke in hushed tones about the day's news. Guess what? I am pregnant. We have a baby. What? He alternated between looking at my face and my stomach. His eyes are welling up. We've got a new family member. Is there anything more enjoyable than this? Hearing his tearful words, I couldn't help but cry as well. We shared the happy news with his parents right away, and they were overjoyed. Even though it was over the phone, we all enjoyed that happy moment together the next day. Despite his busy schedule, Shane became increasingly attentive, ensuring that I did not overexert myself as my morning sickness worsened. Shane became concerned after seeing me spend the majority of the day lying down. Your complexion does not look good. How about we live with my parents so they can help? I wanted to say I was fine, but I really wasn't. I was anemic, feeling ill and worried I wouldn't be able to meet our baby. We explained the situation to Monique and Ted. They readily consented. Of course, we will support you, correct? Ted, that's correct. We are family. Though I felt bad about burdening them, Shane and I decided to move in with his parents about a month after we began living together. Something strange occurred. When I returned from a checkup, I discovered graffiti on the house wall. At first, I assumed it was just some neighborhood kids playing pranks because it was written in chalk. However, it worsened week after week until it was spray painted. Could this be some form of harassment? When I told Shane and his parents, they all tilted their heads in confusion because it was a kid's prank. It's drawn quite high up. Shane, who stands over 170 centimeters tall, noticed that the graffiti reached his eye level, but no one in the neighborhood should be doing something like this. We continued to monitor the situation, but the graffiti appeared at random times, and no one in the neighborhood noticed anyone in this quiet residential area who could be sneaking around and doing this with no consequences. As we tried to cope with our unease, the graffiti grew in intensity. The graffiti started to include our names. Why do they recognize our names? I shuddered with fear, wondering when and where we were being watched. This gave me chills. I didn't even feel safe walking outside. So I discussed it with Shane and his parents, and we agreed to install security cameras for a few days. The cameras did not pick up anything unusual, and the only people passing by were the neighbors. However, on the 5th day after installing the cameras, we finally caught a shadowy figure in the early morning. I awoke from the discomfort and groggily approached the window, where I noticed something moving quickly near the house. Surprised, I checked the security camera and saw a man about 170 centimeters tall, dressed entirely in black. He was dressed in a low-hanging hat and a mask over half of his face. His face was unrecognizable, and I did not recognize him. He sprayed the graffiti and quickly departed. Who is that? Shane approached me as I stood there confused. It's hot. I couldn't sleep soundly. He had also awoken from his discomfort, but there were more pressing concerns. Oh, look at this. Earlier, a security camera captured a man with a spray can. My words seemed to wake Shane up, and he stared intently at the security camera footage as he watched the man leave. Shane murmured that he might recognize who it was. He noted the man's average build, baggy t-shirt, and the way he grabbed the hem of his shirt. Could it be? Do you remember Kenny Green? Is Kenny Green? I repeated the name several times, trying to remember it. Remember the guy who lived next to us in the apartment? Who dressed as a musician? What? That guy. The word musician brought back memories from shortly after Shane and I began living together. We had rented an inexpensive apartment. Our neighbor at the time was Kenny Green, and when we went to greet him after moving in, he appeared to be an ordinary student. He wore baggy sweatshirts and fidgeted with the hems of his clothes. We had a disagreement with him once about noise, which was caused by his loud music played early in the morning. In the dark hours before sunrise, he blared rock music at his ears, splitting the volume. Although not every day, the constant noise made it difficult for Shane and me to get enough sleep. We began to go to work, sleep-deprived. The growing irritation became more difficult to bear. The days passed slowly. Shane had had enough and decided to complain. Kenny, however, became enraged. I want to listen to Summertime Blues. What is wrong with that? I'm asking you to turn down the volume. Then it's not rock anymore, and it doesn't have to be early in the morning. It's disrupting our sleep. Rock is intended for early mornings. His claims were incomprehensible, and despite being in English, nothing was conveyed. His shouting and tantrums were childish and only got worse. As he became uncontrollable and began spewing abusive language, other residents intervened. He refused to listen, even when spoken to directly. It appeared that such problems would persist. Thinking about it made me feel anxious and depressed. We called the management company and asked them to mediate the situation, and the next day, a middle-aged manager came by. He sternly warned Kenny in the neighboring apartment about the noise, stating that it was a violation of the rules and that failure to comply could lead to eviction. After that, the morning blast stopped completely, and there was no sound coming from his place. I remember this vividly now, but it was years ago. We had moved out of that apartment about 4 years prior, and I recall Kenny living in the adjacent apartment at the time. It wasn't far from my in-laws' home, so he could still be living there. Did he bear a grudge against us? If so, will it only be graffiti in the future? What if it endangered both me and the baby? When I told Shane about this, I didn't want to have to live with such anxiety and danger. He nodded enthusiastically. "Let us take this footage to the police. It will be too late if anything happens to us or the baby." We went to the police that day, explained the situation, and requested that they take action against Kenny. The officer who arrived appeared exasperated, as if he had witnessed this before. He did not, however, explain what had happened. I guessed based on his expression. Since that day, there have been no more graffiti incidents, and he has not appeared on our security cameras. According to the police, they warned Kenny not to stalk us or vandalize our home. Hearing this, my mother-in-law felt relieved. Kenny won't be coming around to vandalize anymore, so we can relax for the time being. "Yeah," I replied, but deep down I wasn't completely convinced. Was it really over? I wondered if he'd be back in a few days. Despite my concerns, he did not appear on the surveillance cameras. Maybe I overthought the graffiti. Mischief is coming to an end. Our peaceful days had returned, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Months have passed since the graffiti incident, and I have reached my due date. Thankfully, the baby was growing well, and I was looking forward to meeting them soon. My in-laws and Shane were also eagerly waiting, perhaps tomorrow. Seeing my husband's playful smile, I couldn't help but smile too. However, I did experience some anxiety. Will I be able to cope with the pain of labor and give birth properly? What if I hadn't heard the baby's first cry? Could I truly nurture a human being? The more I thought about it, the worse my anxiety became, and I occasionally cried alone. One day on my way to a checkup, I walked slowly and unconsciously. As I approached the crosswalk, I noticed an elderly woman staggering. Of course, I didn't recognize her. She appeared to be visually impaired. I paused, tapping the ground with her cane, wondering if she'd be startled if I spoke to her. However, as she was about to cross the red light, I decided to speak up. The light is still red. To my surprise, the elderly woman did not appear shocked and simply said, "Oh, I see," and then came to a stop. "Thank you so much." After a while of standing together, the elderly woman turned to face me. She stared at my protruding belly for about 10 seconds before speaking. "That child is not going to be okay." "What?" Her sudden comment caught me off guard. "This is not okay. What exactly did she mean?" Before I could say anything, the elderly woman proceeded, "If things continue this way, you will become a single parent." As cars sped by. For some reason, Shane came to mind. At that moment, the light turned green. Shane's playful smile appeared in my mind, and danger signals began to flash. My anxiety was so overwhelming that I couldn't sit still. I called Shane, who was supposed to be working from home that day. The ringtone echoed. "Please pick up." Waiting with a prayer-like feeling. The ringing has stopped. "Hello? What up?" His voice remained calm as usual, which reassured me for a moment, but I quickly spoke. "I apologize, but could you please check around the house?" "Why?" Suddenly, "Hurry up!" Shane appeared perplexed, but knowing something was serious, he must have understood. I listened as Shane spoke to my father-in-law and went outside, leaving the phone connected. I held my breath and focused on the sounds on the other end. Shane and Ted were talking for a while, before I heard a short exclamation. "Who is there?" I also heard running steps and shouting. Wait. Someone seemed to be lurking around the house, and Shane and his father were chasing them. Shane's frantic running caused the sounds on his smartphone to sound like wind. The sound of a sandstorm, rustling clothes, and running footsteps filled the line. Finally, it sounded like they had caught up with the individual, and I recognized a familiar, angry tone. "You caused me to lose my job. I will not forgive you. I do not think you will be happy now." It was followed by a roaring sound. For a while, there were clashing metal sounds and cries of, "Stop! It is dangerous." I could only grip the phone with sweaty hands, my anxiety increasing. The sounds of a scuffle continued, and I tried desperately to figure out what was happening. There were continuous roars interspersed with a powerful shout of horror. The metal clattering sound was followed by a thud and then silence along the line. What was happening? Nobody said anything. I couldn't understand a thing. I screamed because I was terrified. "Shane! Shane! Please answer me!" Shane brought the smartphone closer to his face, exhaled heavily, and called my name. Now. "Kenny, what?" He held a knife. Kenny had a knife and he gasping for breath. He spoke in broken sentences. Kenny had a knife. "Are you okay? Are you hurt? You weren't stabbed, right?" "It's okay." Dad took the knife from Kenny and caught him. He reassured me. Ted, who is usually calm, is well known in the neighborhood as a strict karate instructor. It was probably thanks to Ted that this happened. Shane said he would contact the police and hung up. I felt relieved too and looked around, only to find that the elderly woman who had been beside me just moments ago was gone. The traffic light had turned red again. It all felt like a daytime dream, as if what had just happened wasn't real. Maybe Kenny was waiting for an opportunity to break into the house and harm Shane. If that was the case, it's a chilling thought. But thanks to that old woman's words, the worst outcome was avoided. I quietly whispered a thank you in my heart. Later that day, after returning from my checkup, Shane greeted me a few meters away from our house. As soon as he saw me, he ran over with a look of relief on his face. "I'm glad you're safe. Thanks for calling me earlier." He smiled, acting as if nothing had happened, showing concern for me. "But how did you know?" "Well, there was this old woman." I told him about the elderly woman I had met earlier, and we both tilted our heads in confusion. There was no blind person in either of our families, and Shane seemed not to know her either. Anyway, Dad and I are both fine, and Kenny has been arrested, so we can relax now. But since he knows our address, who knows when something like this might happen again? I confessed my anxiety about continuing to live here, especially after the graffiti incident. To be honest, I want to move far away. I want to have my baby in peace and raise them in a safe environment. I want a life where no one threatens our daily peace. As I spoke, tears of anxiety welled up and Shane nodded. "Let's talk to my parents, then start preparing to move. We explained the situation to my in-laws, and they agreed that we should move as a family to a distant place. To be honest, we were a little scared too. Moving to a new place takes courage, but given the circumstances, it was the only option. We decided to sell the in-laws' house and began preparing for the move, while looking for a new place. I rolled up my sleeves, ready to dive into the work, but Monique quickly stopped me. "Ruby, I'm sure you understand." She firmly reminded me not to lift or carry anything heavy. "Leave that to us. You need to take care of yourself." Grateful for her kindness. I started sorting through my belongings while packing. I came across an old photo album of my deceased parents. It was covered in dust and the colors had faded. As I flipped through the pages, the blurry photos taken with a film camera evoked a nostalgic atmosphere. Suddenly, a photo slipped out from one of the pages, likely because the glue had worn off. I slowly bent down to pick it up, and when I saw the person in the picture, I was shocked. What this woman standing beside my parents who were holding newborn me was the blind elderly woman from earlier smiling. I turned the photo over and saw my father's handwriting. Ruby meeting her great-grandmother Annie for the first time. So that elderly woman from earlier was my great-grandmother. But how could she still be alive? I grabbed my smartphone and immediately called my Uncle Dot. After a few rings, he answered in his usual relaxed tone. "Oh, Ruby, it has been a while. I wanted to ask you something. Where is great-grandmother Annie now?" "Annie. She passed away a long time ago." His words hit me like a ton of bricks, leaving me overwhelmed with shock, disappointment, and a sense of regret. Was it my great-grandmother's ghost that I met at the crosswalk? Why didn't she say anything? Why didn't she tell me? She was my great-grandmother? Annie. Oblivious to my turmoil, my uncle began reminiscing about the past. It was a hot summer day, even at the end. "She was worried about you, Ruby. My great-grandmother. Yes, right after your parents died in that accident. She was always concerned about you being alone. My heart swelled with emotion and I fought back tears. But look at you now, doing just fine. Annie is surely watching over you from the other side." I nodded repeatedly as I looked at the photo in my hand. Inside my belly, my baby gave a small kick. "That's correct. I'm about to become a mom now." Yes, That is true. I then asked my uncle where my great-grandmother's grave was, promising to visit once things settle down. That's a good idea. I'm sure Annie will be happy after hanging up. Tears streamed down my face. My great-grandmother had been worrying about and watching over me all along. Not just me, but also the baby in my belly, and chained to realizing the depth of her love. I cried big, heartfelt tears. Thank you, great-grandmother. I'll do my best to give birth to a healthy baby. I spoke to the photo of my great-grandmother, asking her to keep watching over me. Later, we successfully found a new home and moved there without any issues. It's a place known for its strong focus on child-rearing, and we've started our new life here. Before I knew it, a few months had passed since we moved. I was able to give birth to a healthy baby boy, and the moment I met him, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Ruby, thank you, and thank you, baby, for being born. Seeing Shane's joy so exuberant, he seemed ready to burst into dance, made me both happy and embarrassed. After discussing it with my husband, we named him Andre, and ever since we brought him home, it's been a whirlwind. Every day. Everything is new to us, and we're figuring it out as we go. I just changed his diaper, and he already needs another one. Reaching out to our wailing son. I was frustrated and ashamed that I couldn't find my child adorable while he cried so much. Babies are expected to cry. It is their job. But when it happens so frequently, I can't even get my chores done, let alone take care of myself. I gradually started losing confidence. Perhaps I'm not cut out for motherhood after all. What kind of mother thinks like this? I've noticed an increase in my frustration and withdrawal. My mother-in-law spoke up. Ruby, you appear tired. I'll be watching Andre for a while. So why don't you have a break? She smiled warmly as she spoke. Andre was still crying, but when she gently soothed him, he quickly stopped. She had decades of experience as a mother. After all. I gratefully accepted her offer and took a short nap. That evening, I sipped coffee in the living room with Monique. She admitted she had been concerned watching me become more and more worn out while caring for Andre. Ruby, you always try to handle everything on your own. I hadn't realized it until she pointed it out. We're here too, so don't push yourself too hard. Let's all work together. She softly held my hand, offering subtle yet comforting encouragement. Her hands felt gentle and warm. I never knew a mother could feel so dependable. Thank you, Monique. From then on, I began to lean on Monique more often. Shane and Ted, prompted by her, also took the initiative in helping with household chores. Thanks to them, I was finally able to face Andre with a little more ease. Ruby, are we running low on diapers? Should I go buy some? Oh yes, please. He made an okay gesture with his fingers and quietly left, perhaps trying not to disturb Andre, who was asleep in my arms. I was incredibly grateful for the support of my family, who all pitched in to help with childcare. It's still challenging, but we're doing our best every day. As time passed and things settled down with childcare, Shane, Andre, and I visited a certain church. Shane carried Andre, who seemed to be in a particularly good mood that day. We were there to visit a grave, having learned from my uncle that my great-grandmother's grave was here. When we arrived at the gravestone, we cleaned it, offered flowers, and prayed. The white lilies stood tall and proud, while a gentle breeze quietly passed by. Andre giggled happily in the wind. Great-grandmother, it has been a while. Thank you for what you did that day. I quietly offered my gratitude at her grave. I'm not alone anymore, so you can rest easy. There was no reply. The gravestone stood there silently, and only the peaceful flow of time continued. Suddenly, Andre started to fuss. What's wrong? Are you hungry? Just as Shane tried to soothe him,